it's recording.
Are you getting this?
Materialism was the view of many scientists at the turn of the 20th century. This simplistic view that all that existed was matter and energy, and the rearrangements of it, is the extreme view of realism. Realism is a general belief accepted by many today that a physical reality exists independent of observation. And roughly 100 years ago, most held to one of these two views, rejecting the opposing view, idealism, the view that reality is a mental construct and doesn't exist independent of observation. For many back then, their understanding of physics seemed to favor this side of the spectrum, firmly believing in period idealism.
So did that come through okay?
Yeah, it came through. It could probably even be a little bit louder, but it was totally audible to me. And I've seen this video. I was in a hangout, just a random hangout that I got invited to somehow, a bunch of guys, and I think they were going through this or some other inspired philosophy video.
Yeah, that's the other guy, isn't it? Inspired philosophy.
Yeah, this isn't Jonathan Ratz. That's a different person, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, not to distract from what you were asking. So yeah, and I also had a big argument in a video, Carneades video, about realism, materialism, and idealism.
Yeah, so I wondered what your point of view was. Does quantum, because yeah, I think I can say that quantum mechanics kills naive realism. Yeah.
If you put that naive thing, all three of those categories are kind of broken by what we know now. I would say.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, I'm like you. I've heard you say things like, "Well, whatever reality is, reality is." You know,
right. So that kind of realism is sort of tautologically impervious, but it's also tautological, so it doesn't get you a lot.
In terms of a particle, I mean, actually, by definition, what a particle is, as opposed to a wave. You know, realism endorses the idea of a particle, and quantum mechanics takes that away and says, no, there's kind of phenomena that might look like particles, but is also spread out phenomena, and there's no such thing as an isolated phenomena. Is that fair?
Totally fair, yeah. So the thing is, I mean, hopefully you could just ignore this and go back to the question if this distracts from it. But so, for example, I was claiming to be a materialist. This guy, it turns out, he wouldn't really say what he is, but I think he was not a materialist. But he kept saying, I'm not a materialist because all I believe is information exists, and information isn't really material. But what I'm saying is with quantum mechanics, that's what we're saying. Being a materialist just means there's material out there. It doesn't matter whether it was atoms or infinitely divisible or whether it's rocks or BBs or clay. You know, it could have been clay with no atoms, right? Clay, right down to no matter how many times you divide it, it's a little clay thing. It could have turned out that way. It's one of the theories. Okay, none of those were true. And if I say, oh, what is it? Information. Yeah, it's a little bit of a cop-out because partly we're just saying, well, information is a flexible enough idea to cover whatever it is that we still don't know. Yeah. But it's more than that because, so for example, with the two-slit experiment, and you have quantum mechanics, which implies there is no particles because it's all waves, but it also is all about there being particles. The discovery is that this particulate discrete nature of everything, including stuff, right, which is a particle. When you're discrete and separated from your neighbor, you're a particle. So, okay, so we have like the two-slit experiment. It seems to confound us when we're trying to figure out which of these models. But if the material thing is information, then it doesn't matter. You put the information into the computing device and you get a result. There's nothing, the fact that you don't quite understand why that's the result is just like, well, because you don't know it's going 5 plus 3 plus a minus divided by 4 times a or whatever. You could figure that out. It's information. There's something like that in there. And that's going on in quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics totally is normal classical kind of thing if you just say, well, the information goes in one way, 1 electron's worth of information, particle, wave, whatever, information, and how did it come out? 1 speck on the screen. How did that interchange happen? Well, that's what we're looking into. It doesn't change if you're a materialist. So I think right now that's the one that unites them all, because the realism thing, I'm still a realist, but like you say, yeah, there's this naive realism, which is a sort of that assumes we're unreal. like that the real world is out there and we're unreal.
I think I'm 3/4 of the way with you on the information point of view, except that I wouldn't go so far as to say reality is information, except to say that that's the most practical and basic way we can view it.
Right.
Yeah, I think information is the most general way of looking at it, but I think reality is a particular instantiation of some doing.
Well, you know how people say that mathematics is behind reality, right?
Yeah,
Somehow, a lot of people, you know, that view that mathematics, it's really made of. The information thing is an extension of that, right? Because the only reason we can say information now and we couldn't 100 years ago is because 100 years ago saying information was like talking about a poem. There was no mathematics of information, but now we got 20, 50, maybe 100 years of information science, longer if you count philosophy, but we have, you know, at least a couple decades of a mathematics of information, complexity theory, all kinds of solid things about information. Suddenly we can generalize this idea that the universe is mathematics to that it's information. Mathematics is how information transformations happen. So,
right,
and it is a little bit of a cheap trick, but it's a good trick.
Information fits as an abstraction to many different realities. I mean,
Yeah.
at least
Any.
one reality is that that there is no space, that we are literally computations on a memory chip, and that you know, the idea of everything is just an update on a configuration on a memory chip, and that works from an information point of view. The question is that the only viable reality? And it isn't. So
well, but what do you mean? Because this is kind of the same problem with mathematics, right? If you say the universe
is deficient insofar as it doesn't provide a mechanism for a reality, a real reality. Even the closest thing we have to an interpretation of information processing is a computer, which would naturally lend us to say, well, then we're in a matrix. We are a computer program.
Well, I think the human brain is a better example.
Go on.
The human brain is the more general example, actually, that we have.
Well,
or the
I think the human brain fits into the matrix idea.
So here's the way I see that problem. I agree with you. Let me try to help narrow in on the problem. Okay, so if you say the universe is mathematics, as they love to say for decades, if not centuries now, there's two problems. The first problem is, where do the constants come from? There's nothing in the math that tells you why the constants are what they are, and you see the physicists do a lot of pondering on this subject all the time. They talk about neighboring universes, or maybe the constants are changing, and they're not, certainly not all of them are constants. So, but then you have the problem, even if they figure that, and people have searched for a mathematical reason for constants. Because sometimes we get that, like there's kind of mathematical reasons for, you could almost say, the speed of light, except for it's based on constants that there aren't reasons for yet, so maybe that doesn't count. So, and then the second problem, of course, is if you did know where the constants came from somehow, from a similarly analytic, mathematical point of view, like, for example, saying there's a multiverse and the constants actually have every value and some of the universes survive or not, okay, why this math? Mathematics doesn't tell us why we have a three-dimensional space with the fourth dimension parameterized, as time. Why not five-dimensional? Why not, why?
The fine-tuning argument. I mean,
yeah. Well, the fine-tuning is with the constants, but there's a fine-tuning also with why not f equals m over c squared or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I've heard Feynman talk about like this. The need for conservation principles could never endorse a cube root, a force rule like gravity.
Really? Because I was just thinking about that. Why not? Why couldn't you have a four-dimensional space?
I don't know about dimensional space, but he argues that
I never saw this.
You couldn't have a conservation principle based on a cube law, or inverse cube law, should I say, because it wouldn't be conservative. And you understand, I forget the argument he used, but
Yeah, but it just seems to me the reason you have the R squared rule is because you have the one dimension of the radius and there's a two-dimensional surface associated with it. But that's because it's going out in a three-dimensional space. If it was going out in a four-dimensional space, wouldn't that bubble be a three-dimensional surface, and then you would have an R cubed law? You know what I mean? I don't see why inherently. But you might have a better argument than that, because I'm into those arguments.
That was my point where I was going.
Well, can I take a tangent from it? Because what I'd like to say is the thing is, you'd be surprised with information processing. Sometimes you can find out that no, R cubed wouldn't work, or like the proof that there's only what, 5 regular solids or 7? Is it? No, it's 5. You know, that's mathematically, it seems like an empirical thing, but they could prove it mathematically. There are things like that you could possibly prove that R squared rule is the way that things like gravitational force are going to, you know, maybe there is an argument like that. You have to be open to that.
That's the point, is there is for R squared, 1 over R squared, but there is, I don't know about higher dimensions, but
yeah,
certainly in our three spatial dimensions, anything other than 1 over R squared wouldn't be conservative. And I forget the argument, but the point I wanted to address.
Okay, yeah, go back, bring us on focus.
This mathematical mysticism. If mathematics is a language that describes things which are give regularity and non-contradiction, yeah, then always mathematics will seem to, if working under the axiom, which I do personally and most physicists do, is that information is conserved and that regularity, same situations give same results, you know, even if they're probabilistic. But under that axiom, mathematics will always be the description because it's the language. If we found some new thing which was about consistency and blah blah blah, it would fall under the paradigm, the label mathematics. So there's no mysticism about the mathematics of the universe. Everything we call mathematics is the language of what the regularities we discover.
Exactly, or it's like making a bust of Leonardo and going, look how much it's like Leonardo, what a coincidence. Oh wait, we found something different, what do? Well, we'll change our bust, we'll change the shape of his sheep. Exactly. And that's what they do, and you see it when you think of modern math and the math that's influenced by physics, because mathematics had a huge failure on the natural world in Newton's time, and they needed calculus and infinite sums and all this work that some people had been doing on infinite sums and geometric series and limits. These all got reused to build a new kind of mathematics because it wasn't, exactly. So you keep making mathematics so it can describe whatever pattern you find. When you find a new pattern, you create a new mathematics. So yeah, you can't be saying that mathematics is in the universe, but there's still something to the Penrose idea that why does that keep working? Why is it possible to keep making mathematical statements about things? Even if you have to create a new mathematics, you know, we also created new bits of English and it didn't work nearly as well.
Get with my second question.
Okay, go ahead.
The reason it keeps working up until now is the assumption seems to be true. That's why it works, is because things do have repetitivity. The reliability in nature is consistent.
Well,
that's why when we work under that assumption, and that's why it keeps out to be true, because it is that we've made a great guess, if you call it.
We force it even more than that, like when you roll a die or 2 dice or whatever. And we see, hey, it's always different. Well, no, sometimes it's exactly the same. And then you figure out, well, the sameness and difference has to do, but really it's random. So we're pretty much saying we're insisting the behavior is always the same. And when we see random behavior, we call that a kind of behavior that's saming again. You know, it's happening. What happened again? Oh, it was random. It's coming up 2 through 12. randomly 2 through 12 every time. It's random, and but see, I'm saying we force the mathematics. If mathematics is flexible enough, even to, and with statistics, capture the irregular behavior as being irregular. The consistent thing about it is its irregularity, and then you could characterize its irregularity statistically.
I think we disagree on this random business and what counts, blah blah blah. But this is what I wanted to segue in, and I think it very much fits as a poignant question at this moment. The second question I asked: if nature is random, so to speak, and there is no mechanism that provides that randomness, is that not one of the central questions I have? Is that not exactly the same as magic? And that's my question to you. Is if I believe there's a mechanism that yields that randomness,
Yeah.
You seem quite acceptant of the idea that nature bestows this randomness as a gift to us. Almost.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's the way I would describe it.
Yeah,
And so I say, is that not equivalent to magic? I say that to you.
Well, see, I mean, I don't. It looks like magic right now, but this is what I'm saying. I mean, if what's going through is an electron is a certain kind of information in the universe with a certain distribution function, and it goes into a system of, shields and screens. Those are also information systems. And then a computation is done, and it comes out. As long as that computation can be characterized, it doesn't have to be 100% predictable to not be magic.
Right, but if it had a distribution function, as you said, in a computational system, that would be defined in it, and would be actually a computation, a machinery that happened at each point in time by the, if you like, auxiliary system. The architecture would gift that probability, but it would still do in a computer sense, in a very machinery sense, in a very mechanistic way. So if you was to argue and say that there was a distribution function, that's in the machinery of the probability that a computer bestows to us, I would say great, but because therein lies the machinery. But if you say it comes from nowhere, then I say that's magic. You get what I'm driving at?
Yeah, but see, right, but we have this phenomena of consciousness where there seems to be choices that get collapsed into a particular reality that happens in the end. That's exactly what's going on in the mathematics of quantum mechanics. So I just don't see any inconsistencies. And then while there's something appealing about a purely mechanical, sequentially mechanical universe, there's things that are unappealing, and we make a trade-off. Like, for example, talking about the electron as a distributed phenomena, that's a big advantage. That's more organic. That makes more common sense than the idea of the atom or the electron being some sort of a point source. What would that even mean? What kind of physical meaning does a point source have? It's better. So we're making some trade-offs, and personally, I think, yeah, I might have a strong psychological bias because I do interpret it as freedom. I mean, the way our will was argued out of existence was based on the classical mechanics that there was no way for it to not be sequentially.
Well, can I just that utility of points of view isn't the question here. The question here we're trying to get is whether we can in any way access some truth about what we're trying to say, and that's separate from the utility of it as I see it.
Right,
so
but no.
But so an electron has spin up or spin down. Quantum mechanics would say it doesn't really have anything until you measure it, doesn't it? Is that right?
Right. Yes.
So the
And that's not a problem with information, right? If it's information, it just has to be a big enough matrix.
so to
We're
us
all
making a measurement, yeah, it's like a toss of the coin, up or down. The question is whether it really had the property of up or down in spin. And what's your thoughts on that, about the upness or downness of the pointiness of the electron? I mean, to me, it had some property, physical property before, yeah. And if it didn't, there's some separate mechanism to provide, like
why can't it be? But why can't it be a phenomena that is the superposition of all those states? It's in an informational state in which it's the combination of all of those intertwined as well, right? Because neighboring bits, like neighboring electrons, it's not just this one's up or down and this one's up or down. It's like if this one's up and this one's down, that's a different state than this way, and it's different than that, and it's different than that, and they're all those superpositions. It starts to permute really crazy, because it's not just every single one is up or down. Every single one is up or down relative to when that one's up or down. So that seems crazy if you're talking about whether the bowling ball is red or blue, but if it's just information, then it's not impossible. Now, why, when we read out the information, does it have to become this one particular classical thing? Well, that's a fascinating question, but
the idea of the superposition, I would say to you that if you're not going to accept that it's either up or down, and that the probabilities yield 50% up or down, I would say to you, why not 2/3 up and why not 1/3 down? If it was entirely...
but it is. It is usually that way, actually. Yeah. Like if they're making a quantum bit out of an electron...
To pause a minute. I did really shocking answer that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. But anyway, yeah, maybe I'm just nitpicking.
It really is 2/3 one way and 1/3 the other way.
Well, in the sense that usually, like the experiments where they're doing this kind of stuff, what they'll do is they put a magnetic field there, and of course the spin is just a word for the fact that an electron, even though it's a negative charge, has a negative and positive pole, right? So it's a little bar magnet. And that would happen if you spin a single charge, you get a bar magnet, and that's why it got called spin, right? And so what they'll do is they'll put a magnetic field, and the lowest energy rate, state rather, for an electron will be spin up, say. So there's a very small chance, like, you know, if you have a compass, if you turn the compass needle around so that north is pointing south and south pointing north, and you get it just exact, it'll stand in that position. But it's not very likely to. Just a little disturbance and it'll swing back around to the other one. And that's what's going on with the electrons. So usually they're in this magnetic field. They'll tend to have, say, a spin up. But some of them have, you know, a 20% or some percent chance of having just happen to have been in the opposite way.
En masse.
But what I'm saying is there always is a ratio. Well, 50% is...
The statistics of up and down, the likelihood, is 50-50, right?
Right, if you're just talking about an electron flying through space or whatever, right. With no magnetic field.
But
even then it's misdescribed, because it's not up or down. It's in every configuration that pole could be in, like 360 degrees.
We're getting to that. Right. I mean, look. The basic statement I would like to have on the table of agreement is that for a random electron passing through our equipment, the chances of it being spin pointing up or down is 50-50, right?
Well, I actually don't think that's quite right. I think for a free electron...
No, that is right by quantum theory.
No, because... except for the spin
No,
is
no, I'm telling you that you'll have to quote me. It's not the case of describing that. You'll have to tell me how I am exactly
spin
wrong.
has to do because
Because I
spin
can
has
tell
to do.
you that the chances of an arbitrary is
Here's what
50-50 up or down.
Okay, here's why I'm saying. Here's why I would say that it's true and why they say that, and also what I'm saying.
Go on.
When the spin of an electron has to do with the fact that it's a bar magnet, and that bar has an orientation in the universe. Spin up is this orientation, and spin down is the other way, right? But for a free electron, it could be this way or that way. So there's always
Right.
spin up or down. Any position that you go to has a spin up or spin down, but it also has spin rotated and phased in all kinds of like polarized. Yeah.
But
Okay.
the point is that an arbitrary, a random free electron, the chances of it is 50-50. Yeah,
No, but
if we set up a measuring apparatus, yeah, each individual one you might imagine has got all these different states, but when we make the measurement, the chances are 50-50 that it says up or down. That's a
more like this.
quantitative
No, here's
measurement
the
about
yeah, but here's how I think.
the average.
Yeah, but my understanding is this.
Not particular examples, but the average of any particular one.
No, it's like this, I think. So this angle of the spin is like a polarity. So if all the electrons are coming to you with their spin in this plane, either this way or this way, and you filter out, so you've got just electrons with spins that are this way or that way, you'll get 50-50 each spin. But if you have a polarized filter that captures the electrons where their pole is this way, it's 50-50 like this. So what it really is infinite number that it's at any angle, and 50-50 at that angle of whether it's this way or that way, right? So the 50-50 is like a sub-calculation on beneath the fact that the polarity of that electron can be oriented any way in space, and it's the superposition of all the ways. Every angle, 45 degrees is equally likely as 90 degrees, is equally likely to, 60 degrees, is equally likely to 100, and then there's always 50-50 between a particular angle and 180 degrees from that angle.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So, but all I'm saying is that does that really count as 50-50?
That's the point, is that you set up your apparatus at whatever angle, and if you wait for a free electron to come through,
yes,
it's all arbitrary. Whether you set it up at this angle, or this angle, or that angle, waiting for this random free electron from time to time to come through. If you count and you've set it up to go 1 for pointing up and 0 pointing down, it will on average be half, and
Right, but if you split the circle into 100 sections instead of 360 degrees, you just have 100 degrees. There's a 1% chance that it's at a particular degree, and there's a half of a percent chance that it's spin up at that. Wait, then there's a 0.5% chance that there's spin up at that degree or spin down. So why not say a 0.5%?
I'm talking about aggregates, not particulars. When I say statistically and the chance of, we're talking about aggregates, not particulars, because we can't know the particulars until we measure it, and in fact you can't know the particular. When you measure up, you're measuring a component of spin, but in a particular direction, blah blah blah,
right.
which accounts for, like you said, about all these different, it can be in all these different angles pointing up, but it still registers as having a component of upspin.
So I wasn't trying to disagree with you, but I did want to introduce the complexity of it. Let's let that sink in. I have a question for you while this sinks in a little bit, because people have been bringing this up again. What do you think about time? Are you in the time is just an invention of man camp, or do you believe time is a physical thing?
I watched a fairly new YouTube just today on it, and this guy who called "Don't Believe in Time" has exactly the position that I have. That time is, he didn't say it this way, but this is the way I say it, is I think, therefore I am, therefore, and I'm going to make the bold jump from the fact that I am and I exist, that other things exist, and that the configuration of those other things gets changed. Now, time is just merely the statement that the configuration of the other things has changed.
Yeah.
That's all there is. That in my mind.
But isn't that a physical phenomena?
Well, it may be if we're, for example, in a computer architecture, we may exist at one polling rate or pacing rate. I get confused between the two sometimes, but the essence is the same. Is that one
but then the
program,
chip is physical.
one program can be updated more frequently than another program.
Right,
So,
but if that would still leave us be physical. We would still exist in a physical computer.
yeah, and I'm happy to think of things. I'm not going so far as to say that that's what we are, but
I know.
I'm really happy to say that that's a really good way of thinking about it, and that's probably the best way we'll ever think about it, which is very close to your idea of information, but you like to step a step further and say we are information, but
Yeah. Well, it just seems to me, though, that example still leaves time as a physical thing. I guess I'm curious as to why there is this concept, this popular concept that time is somehow unreal. I mean, if anything, it's the most real. Now, it's not as it appears to be, right? Like maybe we can go backward in time, and maybe there's a particle of time, but that wouldn't make it unreal. It would just be that that's the way it works. That's the way time works. It wouldn't be unreal because of that.
The problem is that people mystify it because of Einstein's theory, and there is an apparent trade-off that if I want to go from here to here, that has time costs, processing time.
Yeah.
But that is, if I want to go from here to here in that same time, there are costs involved. There are like computing overheads, if you like,
right,
to go further, and that's entirely reasonable to me in that sense of updating.
Yeah, I could see a kind of time where time doesn't have to flow, but we're drifting through it. Like if we were drifting through space and stuff is slowly moving by and there's nothing to grab onto, so we just coast through it at the same speed, but that would still be a real thing. Now, it wouldn't be what we thought it was. It's funny you bring up Einstein, because I love Einstein, but I think he did an interesting thing. I think he really brought us forward in how we think about stuff. But so far forward, he also confused us a lot. And the thing I see is confusing about time and thinking time doesn't exist is the fact that you have to do all this four-dimensional mathematics where time is, in his math, not distinguished from distance. And so that makes it seem the same, but really he didn't change the fact that we live in this three-dimensional space and one dimension of time.
I think Einstein's theory loses something in the entanglement of space-time. You know, there is no it means it's nonsense to me to contemplate the idea of reversal of time. There is no reversal of time. There is only a new change to the configuration that's before us. If that happens to be the undoing of the previous configuration, then we'll call that reversal of time, but it isn't like in a mystical sense. It's just that's like the bouncing ball. You know, it went down, it came up, time reversed.
Yeah, or if fascism rises again in Germany and some guy named Hitler gets elected, it might feel a lot like going back in time, but it really is just happening again. That's what you're saying,
I
right?
wouldn't have picked
It
that
would
as
be a
it's
repeat. Well, no,
it's not exactly a physical example, but
well, if we
yeah,
could have a tractor beam on everything in the universe and put everything back, and all the adults became babies and everything else, it wouldn't really be going back in time. We would have been recreating a past state in the future.
well,
That's what I took you as
here's
saying. It's
one.
like it's automatically the future.
Talk about entangled particles, and here's one, and we've both had similar ideas about the idea of entangled particles being connected by another dimension. And I was thinking about it earlier, and I was thinking that doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense is if they're both referencing the same variable in a programmatic sense. You know, if they're
Yeah.
both referencing, so if there is no actual space, it's just a construct of our idea and wishful thinking. If we reside as a structure, or the electron resides as a structure and a statement, an address, a microchip address configuration, and so does the other electron exist as a map. But they're going to be updated as to their state dependent on another variable in the program. That to me makes sense in terms of what entanglement and this idea of naive reality that I was talking about. It makes sense.
Well, right, but also so does this holographic idea that the data is all broken up and encoded on the surface of this sphere, like at the edge of the universe, and that two things are entangled because they're really the same bit of information at the end, encoded somewhere else. They're or maybe they're two particles right next to each other. On the holographic paper, they're right next to each other, so of course they can touch each other. They're not. They're really local in some sense, and only in the projection do they seem unlocal. Because
but those are two geometrical interpretations, and separate from that, which is also consistent to those. See, it's you've got the 3D interpretation of the mysticism of the two particles interacting over a large distance, or like you said, this surface feature, and it's like that there is no actually concrete way to decide between the holographic principle and the 3D principle. The way I see it is there's no way to. It's wrong to say the holograph is the true reality, or the 3D is the true reality. They're equivalent to each other, and so it turns out computationally you can compute those interpretations or approximations equivalently as a computation, whereby it gets allocated as a variable. So you have three separate realities with no mathematical or physical way of distinguishing between them, to my mind.
Yeah, right, but except for that they diverge, right? So like Susskind points out that with the holographic theory of the black hole, that when the person falls into the hole, he suggests that on the outside you see their ship torn apart. On the inside, the person's in the spaceship just continuing to ride, and the realities have diverged and they come together because the information that was put on, torn up and put on the surface of that black hole has both of those states in it. It has the state where they got torn up and the state where they're cruising for infinity, literally forever, never reaching even the surface of the black hole. But for them, there's no surface. They just keep going. They keep falling forever. That's all they know. There's no threshold. They just fall forever. And the reason both of those can seem to happen for these two different people is because the information that's in the actual universe has both of those states in it. Like a memory structure in a computer could have two photographs, two photoshopped photographs, neither that contradict each other. It could easily have that in its memory. So can a black hole, and they're correlated. You know, the way that the ship went through is exactly where the ship broke up. It's not like they lack correlations. Um,
Have you seen?
and
There's another guy who's quite big on the holographic principle, and he's a youngish fellow with glasses. I thought he might pop up, but I've just typed it in.
yeah, you know what? I use the headphones, so I can't play a video because it won't record. But you have no headphones, so you can play videos. I'd like to play videos in these hangouts and discuss them.
I'll tell you.
Not this hangout necessarily, but I mean the ones I'm doing.
It's Raphael Bousseau.
Mm-hmm.
Is a guy, and I paid attention to one of his lectures, and they start off. I don't buy into this holographic principle because what he said is we're trying to work out about the space in a volume, but the problem is that they don't do that. They understand that when they add to a black hole, what they call the space enlarges. When you put the material into a black hole, the thing that they call enclosing the space is the event horizon.
Right.
And if you put a piece of material in, it really grows.
Yeah.
So the problem which we want to ask, what we want to have an answer to, is never really addressed. The problem they look at is this idea of the event horizon and the fact that it grows and this entropy business and all that blah blah blah. So they've said we're going to ask this question, but the answer they're giving is a different answer, and they sell it to us and they say this is the best we can do, and we say all we can do is imagine the event horizon. But that the sense that it grows is the very sense in which you've not kept the space constant inside it. And I left
no, but why is that a problem? But I don't see why that's a problem, because here's the thing.
If they start off saying, I'm going to analyze a place of constant volume, and then they talk about something whose volume grows when you put it in, then they're actually answering a different question.
Well, okay, fine, but the thing that's really being answered is this. It's really easy to calculate the Schwarzschild radius of really easy. It's the escape velocity of light. And it's based on mass. So the more mass you have, of course that radius is going to be bigger. So when things fall into the hole, it gets bigger. And what's interesting is that the math works out that if you drop in based on E equals mc squared, a certain amount of mass, and you figure out how much information is also in that mass in terms of representing it quantum information-wise with bits, that the surface grows exactly enough to accommodate that information at 1 bit per Planck area.
I'm not saying that.
So that's a big coincidence. That's just how they found the speed of light, right?
I agree. Yeah, it's a remarkable.
It's a big coincidence.
Mathematics, and it is of interest.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty simple because of the Schwarzschild radius is so straightforward. It's almost classical. It's a classical Newtonian escape vault.
It's a subtle missell. They start off the argument about what we want to do is ask the question about what's happening to space inside a fixed volume. But then the analysis, because of this quirk of nature, and it is an interesting fact that it grows to accommodate the entropy and all that business. It is interesting, but the fact still remains is the beginning of the talks always starts off talking about the wish to want to analyze a constant volume and ask about how many like Planck cubes of space there are in there. And ultimately, this holographic question isn't answering that question, is all I'm saying.
Okay, well, but it doesn't sound, I mean, I've never seen it presented that way. Like Susskind, when he presents it, he's talking about when things drop into the black hole, what happens to the information from the beginning. That was the debate with Hawking, right? So it's to me, It's always been about the dynamics of the black hole, but it does answer a question about the
Though
static
is
state.
one of the main players.
It's
Uh,
like how, but wait, no, but they've answered the question about the dynamics, and the answer about what the static state is like between now and the next time stuff falls in, here's the static state. So it seems to me you have solved the static problem, and but you have to do it through a dynamic process because that's how these black holes happen is through a dynamic process.
yeah, I understand that
You know, you bring up
But
an interesting
I
thing here.
argue
Let me
that
pick this
there are
up.
practical. They
What?
argue that there are practical things which are binding the hands, and you're basically arguing the same thing. And I agree. I see the same ones, but
Yeah.
that's fine with me, and it's interesting to me. But don't tell me you're answering one question when really later on you're going to explain how because your hands are tied you never answered that question.
Right,
When
but
you
I
come
don't see
to it,
that part. It seems they did answer the other question, but
I disagree,
well,
but
I think a big issue here too is just what
I have
about
to
these
look.
coincidences of physics? Like I wish I had memorized, but you know, the speed of light was calculated through like four different means, and they come up with the same number. You know, or pi. If you were trying to discover pi, there's a million equations you could discover pi using. And
Yeah.
so these when you have these coincidences, they're kind of like divine coincidences. If you're looking for that and you reproduce a number somebody else looking for something else produced, those usually have turned out to be like
Um,
significant for some reason. You
maybe,
have to
maybe.
understand.
I know what you're
Well,
saying.
because there's a
I mean, I'm
convergence.
arguing that this isn't the exact analogy of that. You know, that pi is the sum of the series of the squares of the integers, reciprocal integers. I think it is. I'm
The
not
Euler
sure.
identity is
Something
the
like
one I
that.
still don't get. It's like
Uh,
that's not intuitive at all. The Euler
oh,
identity. It's like
that's
what the hell? How really? Why
yeah.
would the pi of the to the e of the pi times I, and yet if you see it derived, it's like it's the simplest thing in the world. You can easily expand it and see that it works, you know, but it's still like what? You
Yeah.
cheated with imaginary numbers or something. But
No, no,
well,
it's
so wait, what's the short answer then of the time thing? You're not really you don't sound like someone saying it's just made up, but you're that's the direction you lean in. You kind of are in the time is more of a made up human thing than it is a physical thing, or are you just in the I don't know camp?
I don't know. I thought I
Right,
was
okay.
quite explicit.
Well, which
Uh,
is it then? Because
that,
I'm
that
getting the impression that
I,
you are
I
questioning.
that, that that I exist, that there's an external reality exists, and then it changes, and that it updates, and
Okay.
certain bits of it update regular. For
Does
example,
that make it a physical thing?
if I'm holding a piece of uranium, the laws of quantum mechanics will say that it fires off an alpha particle every statistically, whatever, every fraction of a second or every 10 seconds or whatever it turns out to be. But statistically, it will have that update.
Yeah. Just well, my
And it's
question
that
is it physical?
regularity.
Wait, sorry to
That
interrupt. I got a phone
regularity.
call. It's probably my wife. Let me take a
Yeah,
quick
sure,
break.
sure, sure.
But that sounds like it could still be physical.
Yeah, we see the winter sleep. There he is, the big softy. I'm going to propose.
So I called her back, and then it wasn't her in the first place. Somebody else. Who cares? Anyway, well, okay, so you sound slightly agnostic on asking the question the way I've asked it. On the other hand, you seem to think it's a material thing that, right, time is not necessarily what we think, but it is this sequential changing of configuration which happens, and so it is a real phenomenon. It's not like we're just making it up necessarily.
Yeah.
Though maybe. To some degree, we're making it up. I actually believe with the idea that to some degree we're making it up in that we're misinterpreting it, just like we're making up that the sun rises as a misinterpretation of what's really going on, something like that. Time could be frozen, and because the way we interact with the Higgs boson, we serialize information that could happen all at once, but it happens one after the other, and therefore there's time. That's time. That isn't what we thought time would be. Like you mentioned the river of time. I mean, the whole river of monolithic absolute time, that definitely isn't true. That was an illusion because it just doesn't seem to work that way, right? So, but anyway.
You don't, I mean, very often it's put that Einstein's theory tells us that the future is written, right? I mean, that's if you listen to the Nova Einstein documentaries, that they'll feed you that idea, and several talks I've seen that feed you that idea. That,
well, and Einstein said that.
But then you have no free will, which would go against your philosophy. I think if time was what didn't exist in the sense that I say, if it was this material thing, then it exists forward and backwards and blah blah blah. So
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I think we have to take into account this phenomena of will, whether it's real or not. Like people like you and Gary, you're taking it into account, right? You think that it's determinist, but at least you're taking it into account. I think a lot of times people don't take it into account, and it's really the most important physical phenomena to our worldview. It's like, because it seems like there's choices, and it would be really nice to know how much of that is illusion, like the sun rising, and how much of it is, well, the earth is spinning, so the consciousness seems like this. It's probably something else, but doesn't mean that it's totally, that there's no choices.
I like that idea that we can agree on that you, myself, and Emendum would all agree that we have to take it into account as if we will.
You can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
No, but I'm not even saying take it into account and act like like there is free will. I mean, it's good just to take it into account that it's a question. I think it's actually been ignored as a question. This reminds me, I was going to say earlier that, like, with questions of ethics, I do like to make the argument that when you discuss ethics, you're assuming free will, and I will continue to make that argument, but I know a good counter argument to not just assuming that's the case, because if you could read a book that's a pure work of fiction, the stuff never happened to it, John Smith never existed, and you can answer the question of whether his actions were ethical or not. And they're obviously determined. They were actually constructed on purpose by an author. They're as determined and created as if by a god, intentional creature as could be. And yet, of course, you could ask the question, what he did, was it ethical? So you can definitely have ethics in a what do they call it, nominative state, where you're just calling a certain kind of phenomena ethical or not. It doesn't mean the person had free will. You're allowed to say, look, we don't have free will, but when you kill a bunch of babies, that was unethical. You didn't have a choice, but what you did was unethical. And when you didn't do it, it was ethical. You also didn't have a choice. So it is totally logically consistent and possible. With that one example, the example of fiction, we can ask these questions about characters that never existed and certainly did not have free will. John Smith in the story did not actually have free will, and yet what he went through could be an ethical or unethical decision.
I don't know whether this detracts or not, but I'd just like to add to that when we ask the question of a fictional character, we are abstracting beyond the practicalities of the book to imagine as if he had a choice. and where we've gone
Right.
beyond. When we abstract, we're considering as if
Yeah.
he did have an existence and he did have a choice, and that isn't quite the same as saying that
Yeah.
the person in the book didn't have free will because he
Well, you
went.
just returned my favor by making my argument of why it really does still assume free will, or at least there's an argument that it does. But I think there's also a valid argument that since we know factually there was no free will, it's kind of an example of how it might seem free-ish the way we have to talk about it when we know it isn't really free, and that's why we have to talk about it that way even when it isn't that way. So, but yeah, no, like I said, I'm going to keep saying this argument of you are assuming free will in your ethical discussions because of arguments like the one you just made, but it's far from, I do see the compatibilist way of interpreting things where we can judge willful behavior just as a phenomena that we've named. It doesn't mean choice is real. Right? To
Right.
me, when I break it down, the real question is a human choice to do this or that, is that real at all? Even if it's 90% predetermined, is there 10% of free choice? That's the real question to me. And I think there is. That's where we end up, I think there is a little bit of free choice in there.
This happens. I can't think of another sphere, but there's a few spheres of psychology, philosophy where it happens. The compatibilist changes the question, and it's fine to say that the other problem is intractable, and this is a better question to ask, and blah blah blah, and that's fine. But they don't openly do that. Like I was saying about the holographic principle, it's fine if you really admit that you've not answered the question that you set out to answer. If whether there is there a true dichotomy between determinism and non-determinism, and if there is pure determinism not in the quantum mechanical can we know, that's a practical problem, can we know. The pure determinism point of view is that whether we can ask the question or not is that it is mechanically interlocked to result. If that is true, is it a dichotomy that you cannot have free will? And
Right.
I'm of the position that it is a dichotomy. It's one or the other.
Right. Yeah, well, me too. Like the compatibilist that would say, hey, I'm a compatibilist, and the free will I'm talking about really is free. It's like, no, the compatibilism, I think, is limited to why does it seem free? Why do I talk about my decisions as though I have them? Not that they're real. I mean, there is no compatibilism where the free will really is free. I mean, that's a cop-out, and you don't make that cop-out, and neither does Gary, and I actually appreciate that a lot. But, I
understand there are other interesting questions.
Let me explain my hybrid.
Maybe more important questions.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just, with the compatibilist, I'd appreciate it if they'd just say, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything. I can grant that. Let's get on with life.
Let me describe my belief as a kind of compatibilism. I kind of believe right now what it seems like, is that there's all these possibilities, right? And so you could go through the left door and the right door.
Server error. You're back. You're back.
You're back. No, you're back.
Well, whatever.
What I was going to say, the world couldn't handle my thing. So what I was going to say, basically, let's say this. There's an infinite number of pathways, but they're all predetermined. What's possible and not possible. The not possible things never happen. But the free will comes in that that's in n-dimensional space. I'm a 4-dimensional creature. So in 11-dimensional space, there's a lot of degrees of freedom to walk the graph, to walk mathematically, to do a mathematical walk between possible states, right? So in a way, I feel that that could count in a different era as a compatibilist view, because I do believe it's like, no, we're not talking about you dream that you can fly and then you can fly. We're talking about you can go left or right. Possible thing.
Is that not what you were saying before, though, about it seeming as though we have free will? In retrospect, looking back at all the pathways we could have took, or apparently could
Right.
have
No,
took,
you would say
it
that.
seems
Yeah.
as though we had the choice and we
Right.
chose.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's why I leave that open
That's
as a
the
possibility.
illusion of free will. That
Right. Well, because so many of our choices psychologically, we can tell it's our upbringing or there's causes, right? So, I mean, I see your argument would be, okay, we're four-dimensional creatures in an 11-dimensional space. There's degrees of freedom, but every time you get to a juncture, which way you go is actually predetermined. The fact that you're lesser dimensional than the full dimension gives gives rise to what we call free degrees of freedom, but in reality there's still a predetermination into which direction we choose. So we were still predetermined to choose one or the other, and that's where I'm looking for, no, let's see if the physics really determines that. For all we know, consciousness in the universe is a fundamental of force as gravity, and
how
and
about
it's
Gary's
choice.
point of view? How about Gary's point of view? I think he would say, so he could take this line. He wouldn't say these words. Heaven forbid I try and speak for Gary. But if you're making these decision tree choices based upon a value system that of right and wrong, then from his point of view, to change your evaluation criteria to make sure you choose the right choices, so to speak. I mean, I hate this idea of value, because I think something like personal respect sort of, I just don't think, I think it's a non-starter for many reasons I've gone on about.
Yeah, okay, well, and I have my own ways of describing it. You probably wouldn't see it, but this is why you and I see it, but you and I are more compatible, because ultimately this antinatalism thing, taken from a political point of view, is obviously, to me, a pro-choice issue. And what pro-choice is about is respecting that I'm not a solipsist. I had that decision to make, and I decided I'm not. I really think you are an agent too, and therefore I respect that. Therefore I'm pro-choice, and that affects so many decisions. Probably, I guess, starting with antinatalism, including abortion, including end of life, euthanasia.
I think, what we were talking about before we started about purposes. As me respecting you as an agent means allowing you the freedom in this reality to set your own purposes.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of valuation automatically rules out that chance of respecting individuals, their own purposes to make their own happy lives.
Yeah.
In whether it be stamp collecting or computer programming or
or just take it politically again. I think politically the issue is we don't want the government or myself to make all the hard decisions in life. People have to make their own hard decisions. If the decision is hard but you think you know the right way, no, it counts as a hard decision. That goes in the pro-choice category. And it's almost a political thing that we take as more primary. And I think it's funny with Gary, because I think politically Gary would agree with that, but philosophically he does not agree with that, and he's been focusing on his philosophy. If he'd been focusing on his local politics the last 10 years, it might be different.
Mendeleev said, I don't give a fuck about that. He said, if somebody wants to overrule me and tell me the right way to live my life, what I ought to be doing to save me from falling under the bus, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think it's his kind of phraseology. I want that, is what he says.
Yeah, because he'll reject it, but he wants us to try.
He doesn't grant anybody the wisdom above himself to be able to say that.
Right, yeah, that's the problem.
And that points to the exact point we have. In the one sense, he's arguing for, what was the regime? Pol Pot and...
I might have missed this one.
you know, Pol Pot.
Yeah, but I don't know about Gary being pro Pol Pot.
No,
That wasn't it.
but but the point is advocation of the right way to live. If somebody has the insight, then he doesn't mind authoritarian points of view. And but the trouble is from a personal point of view, he won't respect. You know, I don't know. There's a deep antagonism.
Hey, you know what? There was another thing we were thinking of talking about a little bit, which was this Republican debate we had, which you hadn't seen.
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
Oh my God, let me tell you. Okay, so the first part that was really terrible is before the debate, they cut to the newsroom to their commentators, and they played this at the debate. The commentators going, "Oh, Jeb Bush has to show he's this, and Trump's the big man on stage." All their bullshit that they normally do. But this was actually broadcast to the audience at the debate, as if the debate was Crossfire or something. I mean, you know, so it started off with that, and also Megyn Kelly was the central host, and she's all joking and laughing, and they're trying to make it like, yay.
Priming the audience.
And then the other thing, totally. Yeah, and for the correct candidates, too. But also priming the audience in that all of the questions were the kinds of things conservatives care about. Well, in the old days in America, when the League of Women Voters, feminism alert, when the League of Women Voters was running debates, you know, Republican or Democrat, they asked whatever was in the newspapers. It was still biased, but they asked whatever the issues of the day were, not just the ones that fed to your red meat party, but also what things that the other party thought were important. And then the third thing is all of their questions were like gotchas. Like, there was no question on what your policy is. Everything was a gotcha about, or like, for example, the first thing they did was, okay, we know you guys hate these questions where we make you raise your hand. American debates now have the raise your hand debate. Raise your hand if you love America. Who's not going to do it? You know, they said we're only going to ask one of them, but it was the first question. And as much as I hate Trump, it was pointed at Trump. It was, would you run as a third party candidate? Or no, it was worse than that. It was, would you refuse to run? Raise your hand if you refuse to take an oath that you won't run for a third party. And Trump's like, well, fuck you guys. If I don't like the nominee, I'm running for president. And the funny thing is, it's bad political strategizing, because basically they need to treat him nice enough so that he doesn't run, because if he does run, he will totally take more conservatives than he takes Republicans, and he only has to take 5 or 10% to make a huge the total difference to change the election. And so it was funny to put him on the spot, especially knowing he's such an egotist. He knows he was put on the spot, and he said already, I want to run as a Republican, and if I'm treated fairly, you know, I'll bow out. And yet they're going to antagonize him, which can only hurt they've actually gotten to the point where they just do their propaganda. Even if it's counterproductive, that's just what they know. They go through the kabuki dance. They wanted to assassinate Trump,
is he
so
in the
they ask a question like that.
Throwing away that money, though? It sounds like he's
I don't think he wants to run.
As a third independent sort of person, but he knows he could never win except hurt the. And I don't think he'd throw away that money. But you know,
I never thought he was really running. I thought it was more or less to get a sequel to The Apprentice. But he already had The Apprentice, and he actually lost it because of the thing. So who knows now? He could be all in just by the luck of how it turned out. It didn't turn out how he wanted.
I've got Donald Trump, a book by Donald Trump. What's this called?
Oh yeah, The Art of the Deal. Art of the Deal. Art of the Deal?
No, something kick-ass.
Oh, I only know Art of the Deal. He wrote Art of the Deal, and it was like a bestseller in the 80s or some shit. So
I got one by him. It was good from a point of view, but I'm trying to remember the way I hated it.
Well, his politics used to be a lot better. You know, pro-choice and pro-immigration and New York liberal, really. It's funny. That's one of the things weighing him down now is he's on record as being for single-payer health care and things like that, which, you know, you might as well be a communist to say that in the United States.
It's
I mean,
it's
I'm not even
like,
for single-payer health care, so.
it's like something like "Stop Mourning and Kick Ass" or something like that. The title of his book, or subtitle.
The thing is, he's gone bankrupt like every 5 years, the last 25 years. So it's like, and then and at the debate at one point when they asked him about his bankruptcy, he was like, "Well, I took advantage of the law of the land to restructure my businesses. I've never gone bankrupt. My business I put through bankruptcy several times." And he even has quoted the whole thing. You know the old thing of like, if you owe the bank $1,000, you've got a problem. If you owe the bank $1 million, the bank has a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
He used that. He's like, well, when you owe $500 million to people, you'd be surprised what they do to the deals they do.
Get
250. Yeah, especially since they've made all this money on interest, and these guys that are talking about losing that money, they don't really lose money in the end. They're just making less. But anyway, so you could almost defend him on that. But the funny thing is, so then they were asking him, and then he said, well, the United States has 17 trillion of debt, which it's not up to 17 yet, I don't think. I think he said 17. It seemed like too big of a number, but it's like at least 14, 15. And he's like, and you need someone like me to deal with it. But he just spent 5 minutes talking about how he deals with that by going through bankruptcy. And the bankruptcy of a country is a tiny bit more messy than the bankruptcy of a casino company. So it was like, dude, we don't want to go through bankruptcy.
Do you not think about the USA debt and everybody's debt, that we're playing a big game and nobody wants to call time on it? You know, I fear, honestly, for I think it is imaginary. I can imagine that it's possible that what looks like a harsh reality now, that we're playing this big game and somebody can call time on it, and it'll just be the world's worst disaster, that somehow it can like wriggle its way through and not be that. I think
real simple.
But the way it seems at the moment is that there's a game that's playing, and it's in everybody's interest to say, let's pretend like it isn't a game, and that we're not all bankrupt, really. And
I totally think that, yeah. No, but the thing is, I do think there's a way. I think it's not likely to happen. But basically, right now, it looks like where it ends is class war. Because the problem is, the smooth way is that the bankers have gotten a ridiculous amount of control over the money. There's just supposed to be money exchangers, but they actually hold all this money and are the richest people. And all of the world's problems could be solved if we just took that money and didn't let them have it. And how likely is that to happen? It doesn't look too likely. So how will it happen? Well, through some kind of class war or something, because it's unsustainable that the bankers would have more money and resources than the productive people that actually produce goods that we use every day. You know, that Apple is known as the biggest company, but really it's JP Morgan is bigger. And, you know, and we see it all the time. For example, Obama failed they try to say he's a socialist. It's like, well, when you bail out $1 trillion worth of bad debt, you don't give that trillion to the banks if you're a socialist. You give it to the people that got left holding the bag. People with houses that they need a house because they go to work from that house. Those people should have got the bailout, and you could actually smoothly get out of this situation if when you bailed out banks, you let the bank go bankrupt, nationalized it maybe, made it a credit union.
The thing, though, under the pressure.
Is that going to happen? Yeah, under this pressure, no. But where's it go except for a reawakening of more radical political ideas?
Lots of people made good arguments saying we didn't have to bail out the banks. Well, you know, like you said, it could be done the other way, the inverse way, equally
and
as
the
well.
Banks will get the money.
And let the shareholders suffer for the risk they bought.
But the other thing is, if you bought those mortgages, you'd be buying them from the banks, and the banks would actually end up with the money. It's like you could have taken this trillion and given it to 2 people, and instead you gave it to 1. You know what I'm saying? It's weird because you could have given it to the people that own mortgages. Those people would have paid their mortgage off with that money. The banks get that money from the paid off mortgage. and it's the same effect as giving it straight to the banks, except for you also save the people. And the banks that even with that bailout, some banks wouldn't make it, and those ones would be
I
the
think
ones like, well, welcome to the free market, motherfucker, caveat emptor. That's why you got the big bucks,
I
because you
think
were
the
taking
thing
that
is,
risk.
at the top of the food chain, when the shit's hitting the fan, that people make safe decisions and people
Yeah.
give safe advice. Nobody wants to say, look, people want to say, well, if the banking goes up, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
The people could turn to civil war, and they like to they err on the cautious side rather than and
Well, but that's
that's
a
why
little
we ended up where
forgiving.
we
I mean,
ended up.
that's a little forgiving because that's part of it. That's what they use in the press. But really, I mean, come on. It's more simple than that. It's like Hillary Clinton is a New York senator, and there's a lot of banks in New York. You know what I'm saying? It's
Well,
London is a huge ally of us, and all the banks
there's a
are in
lot of
London.
vested interests at play,
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
sure. Yeah,
yeah,
but
for
I
sure.
think, all right, granted, there's these vested interests, plus this nobody wants to go against those. That's the point. Is
Yeah,
when you go the safe route, you're going
yeah.
with populists and the vested
Well, yeah, no,
interests
right.
and
And in
everything. The
defense of
rolling
them,
ball. Nobody wants to go against the rolling ball when they're saying
yeah.
cataclysm can occur.
Well, yeah,
It's
no, a
like,
bank is going, hey, if you let us struggle, then we're not going to be able to issue any mortgages in the next 6 months. And since there's only a dozen of us left after all of the
yeah,
collection of companies, that
doom and
will
gloom.
cut your mortgages by 20%. No, and that's true. It is a safe thing at that point. On the other hand, this example of giving the money to the people, it seems so obvious because the banks still end up with the money that's just greed. They're like,
Mm.
no, we don't want to wait a month to get a check from the people that owe us money. We just want the money directly.
With
Why, to get the
hindsight,
money
it
that much
does. I mean,
quicker?
it's
Yeah.
with hindsight it does. I mean, but it's essentially given to the 1% rather than the 99, isn't it?
Yeah, or even the point one. It's the
Yeah.
0.1%. That's the funny thing I like is that the 1%, at the bottom of the 1% is just a lot of working class doctors who really deserve to be making $300,000 a year. That's fine. They're,
Yeah.
the ones we're really talking about is this 0.1% that
Yeah.
is
Right.
that's as advanced over the bottom of the 1% as the 1% is over us. And that's the thing I'm saying, that like I would jump back to mathematics out of politics and say, look, mathematically, that ends in a class war. There's no other way. Eventually, people are like, there's enough money to feed us all, but we're starving. That's not okay. And they never seem willing to change course and share the wealth
Well, the
until we make
problem
them.
is ethics isn't coming into the principles
Yeah,
of
why is
government.
that?
I mean, um, either way, myself or yourself, I think are right, and in Mendham, all see an equality, right? And John Rawls has the veil of ignorance that
Yeah,
says, this would be the way to allocate reason.
yeah,
There would be a great equalizing of the distribution of wealth,
yeah,
to allow for incentives, but not to the extent that we have now. If you
right,
had this veil of ignorance, you'd see the necessary equality if
yeah,
you have a veil of ignorance. But that's a principle that isn't politically and what constitutionally
yeah,
endorsed. And I think it
yeah,
ought to be. I think we in the UK we don't really have a constitution like you do. And
yeah.
one day we should have a constitution which
You got a queen.
endorses this veil of ignorance idea, I think.
Yeah, my thought on that, I had to, do essays on that book and stuff in philosophy, in political philosophy. And my view is that I think he's right, but I don't think we'll ever get there with the veil of ignorance. What's really needed, what it really points to, is that we need people that without ignorance could make those decisions in the real world. Now, you could. It's definitely true that he basically says pretend you don't know who you are in the society and design the perfect society, not knowing who you're going to be in it. Okay, it's a good mental thought experiment, but the reason we don't succeed at doing that is because you can't do it with ignorance. You have to do it knowing I'm from a rich class, I'm from a poor class, and you have to be able to have that same result to think of the perfect system even though you do know where you're from. And that's why it's extra hard, is that
But how do
people
you
have
do
to have
that?
a veil of
What,
knowledge.
what are the rational? What are the rational arguments from that position? I mean, game theoretically, if I'm rich,
Well,
game theoretically says that I back the system that keeps me rich.
yeah, except for here's what's really going on in the city. Like I saw when I was living in the city, apartments going up with like these spiked walls, in bad neighborhoods, nice apartments that are just like supposed to be an oasis, like it's Roadrunner and they're just surrounded, or walled communities, gated communities. And my point is that the rich are not acting in their self-interest. You don't want to be the richest person in a city full of ghettos, and where when you try to go watch some music or some jazz or something you get robbed. It's in your best interest for your city to be prosperous. It really is. And why they don't get that, why they think, no, I'll just build a wall and that'll be great, it's the pathos of distance. They'll feel better than everybody else. They get a big jolly off that. But if you really did a mathematical measure of, yeah, but how do you feel when you have to go out of your gates and go to the store, we would find out that it's actually in rich people's best interest to have a good neighborhood.
I went to watch The Who with my mother, right? And we had really shit tickets. My mum got to the front because we were so high, and she had vertigo, right? And she got a panic attack, and they put a real. But the point was, what I'm trying to make is the way they do it is that they engineer society such that to enjoy these pleasures requires you being rich, and that we were among like people, and that we weren't likely to be robbed. So they've got over the problem by all the pleasures of life and where they wish to live and do their business is away from these people who might rob them. So they're happy,
Yeah, right. But really, when
you're a picture. I know what you're saying,
yeah.
But I'm just being a bit of devil's advocate.
No, and that's how they see it. But I do believe in my side of this argument where, if you're in New York and you're filthy rich and you can live on that 15th floor penthouse and you don't have to worry about the world, well, no, sometimes you go down into the world, and you'd obviously be better off if you could walk in Central Park at night. Because your 20-year-old daughter might do it with her 20-year-old boyfriend anyway. So you'd just be better off if it was safe to go do that for everybody. You'd be better off. But they don't see it that way. They have an attitude right now, and this is why it's going to a class war situation again, is they have an idea they can wall themselves off. They could go to the opera where everybody's rich and they don't have to watch their purse when they leave it at their seat, and they can. I'd
rather have 100 billion in the bank account and pay for bodyguards to jog round with me round Central Park than give up my 100 billion.
But have you noticed how their kids are always like, I'm tired of having bodyguards around all the time? Their kids don't ever go for that.
This appeal you make, how are you going to win the argument in this personal knowledge point of view? The only way to win the argument is from this philosophical veil of ignorance point of view, the way I see it.
No, I think you're right, but that's why I say it's intractable. No, I think you're right, but to me, that's why it's intractable. That's why there's a catch-22.
If you say it's intractable, you're saying there's no hope. Let's all. You might as well.
I'm going to bring the geopolitic back in, which is if they keep doing this, what happens is it comes to arms, and if we need to, we populists will get some thug. We'll all get behind that thug. That thug will kick those guys out, and we'll take our chance with the new thug. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
what we've done for thousands of years, and I don't know why,
But
you
what if
know,
this is the danger, though? This is the dystopian film cinematographic view of reality, is that just because it's gone on for a millennia and more, several millennia, that this has been the repetitive nature of history, it doesn't mean that it will repeat. We could be permanently enslaved by technology and surveillance and this, that, the other. That we could never break out like we did in history.
well, which do you think it's going to be? I mean, do you think we're going to find a smooth way to into this
Oh,
future? Because we're not going to
I don't
not
know.
go.
My mother always said, "Nothing was given without a fight." And as I grow
That's what I'm
older,
saying.
I fluctuate day by day, literally, between whether we can, I see gay marriage sanctioned and women's rights sanctioned and this, that, and the other, and various progresses. And I like to think it can all be achieved democratically without violence, but I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't
Yeah, me
like
neither.
to.
I
I,
like to think that all we need is a young generation, right, to have the right attitude, and you'd be surprised how fast things could change.
I,
But
I,
we'll
I'm
see.
optimistic. If I had to guess, and place whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic about humanity, I'd have to say optimistic,
Oh,
because I
really?
think, yeah, I think history bears out optimism. From where we were,
Yeah,
from where we've been to where we are,
yeah,
there isn't evidence as much as it seems corrupt and
yeah,
everything. I don't think history bears out for pessimism. It's just
yeah.
unfortunate for those who like to philosophize and see the logic and reason behind things that were born in the wrong time. It would be nice
Yeah.
to be born in a millennia or two. And
I know.
and
My stepson likes these questions of would you, like to be this superhero or that superhero or whatever, and he did the what decade, and I'm like 2090. And they thought my wife and him thought I was talking about the 1890s, and I'm like, no, the future. And they're like, no, no, new rule. It has to be the past. But but yeah, no, that's also what I think. So it's to me, like I was talking to you offline earlier about this thing about every day trying to, see that life's worth living. Um, I would say it's a combination between thinking that pessimism has the long term in favor. I mean, optimism. Sorry, oops, Freudian
mm,
slip. And the fact that we're still slaves, meaning I don't want to give in. I have a tremendous amount of energy just to not give in to misery that I think is caused by the kind of economic system we live in. So I'm like, well, between those two things, it's worth keep trying, right?
mm,
It's not a particularly optimistic approach to life necessarily, right? I
mm.
mean, it's just more like, well, I feel like if I went antinatalist, then I'm saying that
Well, here's
George
one.
Bush's
Here's,
of the
here's a
family.
here's a depressing thought. I mean, my uncle recently passed away, and he was a great
Yeah.
macho man, let's say. And he would say, this idea is because I feel like I'm very often giving in and prepared to give in and say, no, this is not good enough for me at this time. I should have been born 100 years in the future or 1,000 years in the future. I ain't, I ain't going to. And this whole idea of putting up the good fight is kind of a macho cultural impression,
Yep.
that it
Yeah, I
counts
think
blah,
so.
blah, blah, blah,
I'm
blah.
happy I have
So,
it though.
so in literally in the same almost in the instance after the fact that you say what you said, like there was an instant where I'm thinking, you know, that's really good. And then there was an instant of time afterwards, I'm thinking, that's really bad, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
really that conflicted because there is no true argument for that. So I can instantly say, Pyro's right, I need to fight the good fight. But then this next second, I'm saying to myself, but that's just macho fucking shit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it is kind of macho shit. I'm just so in touch with it that it's like, okay, whatever. Whatever it is.
Well,
You know,
look, I'm glad for
it's a
anybody.
bias. It's a bias on my case is what I'm saying.
I'm glad for anybody who can get through this life whatever way they can, and I don't mean to detract from any purposes that anybody sets themselves. But when it comes down to philosophically endorsing a particular virtue or
Well, I feel like you and in Mandham, to a certain degree, we're arguing about whether it's legit to create your own purpose. Because I kind of feel like, yes, we live in a purposeless world, but I've seen plenty of activists create a purpose to their life, and it's a good thing. Sometimes they don't think it's a good thing because they didn't achieve their goals.
Yes, exactly.
But it was a good thing. I can see it was a good thing.
Hang on, this legitimacy of creating a good purpose is exactly it. Because to whomever presents the purpose that they've found, you always have this psychological argument that Emendham has that it's like a fictitious projection just to keep yourself happy. From my point of view, or from Emendham's point of view, it's just a nonsense.
Yeah, but that's another thing. So wait, that's another legitimacy question. So what if I am just? I was asking you that earlier, right? This is part of our private conversation. I guess I'm bringing a little out. Is that
it's fine with me?
Let's say I spend 3 hours a day making myself chipper, and I don't have to. I could make myself more sad. Why is that illegitimate? If I go ahead and make myself a purpose just in order to have what is a masturbatory experience, are you saying masturbation is wrong? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I made myself feel better. Might that not just be the point? Might that not be what we're trying to do? Make ourselves feel better. And if it's possible, then what makes that not legitimate? Well, why can't I be just trying, you know?
It's not so much that I'm going to say it's illegitimate, but when you truly see that there is no purpose in life, from that vantage point, you understand that every particular purpose is masturbation in a way, mental masturbation, or physical masturbation.
But you just said that there was no purpose, then you talked about these other purposes. What you're really saying is there's no legitimate purpose. There's these potentially illegitimate purposes, and I'm saying what makes that illegitimate? All we're left in is there is no ultimate purpose. We agree on that, I think. Then we're left with the non-ultimate purposes that are invented by people, and we judge those purposes, and sometimes they're fucking great.
Right.
I mean, I don't even like Mother Teresa, but the purpose she created for herself, it's hard to badmouth.
That's the difference between Emendham and myself. That I won't judge you and say your purpose is illegitimate. Emendham seems to take that position that there's a difference between there's no purpose in life. There's the opposite of no purpose in life isn't illegitimacy in purpose. There's kind of a neutral sense. The opinion I have on everybody's purposes is neutral. Yeah. So in respect of you as a free agent, I won't judge you as illegitimate.
Well, it seems negative though. You're making this distinction. I appreciate it. I think it's interesting. But you're
I
talking a
know.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. It does seem to carry that, but I don't. It's not intended by me to carry that negative connotation.
Well, it's kind of like you have a feeling that has a negative connotation. But
Well,
again, because of this pro-choice or accepting agency of other people, you have a conflict, and you're like, well, as a result of this conflict, I'll use my rational mind to decide how to behave. But the fact is, your feelings are still that it's illegitimate. Your
how about
feelings
this?
lie in that it's illegitimate.
No,
Your
no,
politics
no,
lie in that even if it's
no,
illegitimate, you let me
no.
have it.
How about this, right? You've selected a purpose in life, right? And it makes you happy. It makes you happy. From
Gets me
me,
through the day.
the position that I operate from, what I'm saying about your purpose is that I can't find any rational reason to choose it, right? That's all. That's all I mean. So you're saying, well, not you're saying, but somebody might say, watch chimpanzees in the wildlife. That is just fulfilling, yeah? And I have no rational reason to choose it. And I'll go, it's making you happy, fine. But from this point of view that I have, I can't, I see why you're choosing it, and it's because it's a mental masturbation.
Yeah, it's a good example, because I wouldn't want to choose that either, but I respect it, yeah.
I mean, actually, I'd like to do it for 6 months or 2 years or whatever. It seems like a really good thing I'd like to do. But I wouldn't like to think of it my life's work or something, but
yeah.
I don't know, some other purpose.
No, it's a perfect example, because I love the Diane Fossey thing, and yet it's not my deal.
Believe that that's the purpose, to have big families. And I'd look at it and I'd say, fine, you chose that, you do what you do, but I can't find a rational reason to choose it. And so that's where I'm at, is that I find no rational reason to choose anything. The fact that
well, that's not quite true. You're just blocked from the things you would do. Like, you would contribute to math and science, and we do not have a society.
That's mental masturbation. I mean, do you subscribe to Rorschach Romanov? Formerly Luddite.
Familiar, but no, I don't remember.
Anyhow, but he asked the question. He's very philosophically dense, or very verbose, and you know what I mean. Very wordy. Verbose is the only word, right? And he said, why am I doing this? Is it for my own mental masturbation? And the truth is yes. Because he's... And why am I making videos? And why
are you watching his?
Yeah, well, why am I... Well, I've said... I made a reply video why I said I watched his. Because he educates me to language and this, that, the other. But it's kind of a mental masturbation. The idea that I can contribute to physics or mathematics is that I understand it from a rational point of view, and this is when I'm suicidal, is even I'm pushing that away and saying, look, even that's just a mental masturbation. There are no purposes.
Yep. No, that's very deep, that, actually. I agree very much. And that's kind of, I feel that way about my own semi-depression or whatever it is I'm going through, that to a certain degree, one of the, actually, I believe that my generation, which we share, but in the United States at least, one of the things, there's 3 values, which is slack, like just relaxing. And then being truthful with a little t, like honest, not that you're right, but just, talking bullshit even. These are all 3 semi-negative values. And then the last one is apathy. Like, that's what solved me with homosexuality, is like, you know what, I really don't care. It's like, I really don't care what you do. As a matter of fact, if I had to think about what heterosexual people do, I don't care about that either. And so it's really the apathy thing that And so that's kind of the thing, like including suicide is like, you know what? I'm apathetic about that too. I'm not going to put faith that that's a solution either. I'm
yeah.
apathetic about getting all behind this, that it's another illusion. It's another one of these fantasies. So why do it? You know, why suddenly act on that when you're feeling all like not acting on anything else? There is no reason. You might
Yeah,
as well act on the part of yourself that says, you know what, I'd like tomatoes, I'll work in a garden. Or,
exactly.
hey, I like
There's
mathematics,
that.
I'll work on an equation.
Well, tomorrow I may wake up, as I often do, with enthusiasm for something, right?
Oh, I'm the
And
opposite.
exactly the same. I mean, hypothetically, it might be 11 o'clock, or I might wake up and develop, blah blah blah. But the
Right.
point is the same reason is I have when I do get an enthusiasm or something to maths or whatever. There's no reason to reject it. It's giving me happiness, and there's no reason to analyze that purpose and say, wait a minute, stop it.
Yeah.
This is all. So, and this is the kind of deterministic way in which, like I said before, that when you have depression, you don't even have the will to spend that 3 hours or an
Yeah.
hour trying to correct your mental attitude. It's a weird thing.
You know what else is weird is everybody's metabolism is different. But, you know, you said that it was just an example, not that you wake up with that feeling. Sometimes you wake up with a different feeling. I have been consistently waking up with, like, life sucks, it's heavy. And then I have to work on it for a few hours, whether I wake up at 10 or 12 or whenever I wake up. And then I've dealt with it for the day. And as I told you before, I distract myself with work because work, I get totally sucked up into it, and then I don't even think about thinking about anything else. You
Exactly.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
you know what you said about not remembering? I find when I talk to psychiatrists and doctors and stuff, you know, in a really weird kind of way, I almost can't describe to what I woke up like this morning. You know, it's sometimes frightening that I can give a flavour of what it may be, but when I try to grasp the exactness of it,
Yeah.
uh, it's really difficult.
Well, that's
And
why
to
I had made that
remember,
journal of mine, and
to
also besides
remember
using
particulars.
by using codes instead of like regular words, I also didn't have to actually identify my feelings in words. I could just identify them with a single symbol. So like I'd wake up and I'd draw a symbol. Halfway through the day, I'd draw a symbol, meaning how I thought I felt at that moment. And then I could
Mm.
look at it, and it really helped me a lot in the sense that when I thought I was depressed and I'd look at it, I'm like, actually, I'm happy most of the time. This 10, it's, you know, you only need 20% of depression to really kind of fuck up what you think you're going through.
I
You don't
say,
need a lot.
well, I'm doing. I have to remind myself that I'm doing better. I'm, I'm,
Mhm.
I'm in a better mode than I was 3 to 6 months ago because now I say
Yeah.
to myself, I'm losing weight. I'm getting control of my financial situations.
You're a shiny
I'm,
bald
I'm
man.
studying. I'm studying. But like you said, there's this 20% of negative thoughts can drag the whole shit down.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And sometimes, like 6 to 12 months ago, I didn't have even the will to look internally and see the progresses that have been made or the
Yep.
potentials and so forth.
Well, that's the
Um,
thing about depression, or what I was calling semi-depression, or the depressive aspects of other personality disorders, is the weird thing is we all think about it, or at least in America, is oh, depression's about being sad. That's not really what
yeah,
it is. It's the
no,
sapping of your energy
yeah,
to do anything. And that's
it's
one reason is why it's interesting, but a lot of times people cope with the depression through like behaviors like cleaning up their house. But then
yeah,
they're productive and their house is clean and they feel better and it's actually a good reason. It's actually
Well,
a good reason that that is medicine for depression.
well,
And
when
you
we
can do the
talk,
same thing with mathematics. You could say, I'll do a little mathematics, and wow, I feel a little better today, and I forgot about my
well,
depression. But it's hard.
when we talk about existing in slavery, you know,
Hmm.
that undoubtedly provides a shadow of depression on a great deal of humanity, but they cope with it
Yeah.
somehow. They bear it and find little
Yeah.
happinesses and little purposes, and you know, you get to where I'm at, or in Mendham's at, or maybe yourself, or you know, and it becomes.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about truth. When you see certain truths, it's not always helpful to ignoring the things which might depress you otherwise. You know.
Well, that's the thing about I was saying about Nietzsche is that I'm sort of dedicated to the idea that as a philosopher, my job would be to face those realities however they make me feel. In order to see, the experiment might even be to see how it makes me feel. You know, maybe the experiment is this should make me feel better because it's reality. And I feel like I've succeeded with that against this one question, this postmodern question of the destruction of classical meaning and classical purpose. It's like I experience that as a positive thing, but there's still the remnants of that that are hard to deal with. But in general, you know, I'm glad that we're in a purposeless universe because I'm glad that means that I don't need to listen to Gary to find my purpose. You
I
know, I
don't
could.
know. It would be nice in 1,000, 2,000 years, but at the moment, the rat race slavery of it seems to dominate my thought pattern. You know, I
Yeah, I
mean,
think so too. On the other hand, to get personal, I think that there's a golden age coming for exactly your skills. Like what I do for a living, programming, people that know math, they're able to do data science. And that's huge. Data science, everybody needs data science work. And it's fun. It's the kind of thing where you could work for a business doing business intelligence. And it's interesting, even though maybe their goal isn't very interesting. You know,
but,
it's like,
but
it's
do you
very
know how
interesting.
obnoxious that sounds to me at this moment?
No, why?
Because for every purpose, like you said, I have a mathematical skill. This is useful.
Yeah, you have a mathematical skill.
It's
There's a
it's
lot of room to make it. You
right.
could be an
Well,
Einstein still of a
but it's
mathematical
but
insight.
it's sickening to me. The idea
I
that
mean, I'm
I give
sorry,
up.
I'm laughing.
Look,
I
I
shouldn't
tell you
laugh.
what I want. I tell you what I want to do. I just want to exist and think. Yeah, if it, right. But but unfortunately, I have to jump through hoops to do that.
Well,
That's
except for
the
we
point.
just don't have the tools.
And
What if we had the tools?
when you tell
You
me
could be teaching mathematics or
my
something online.
skills are good at jumping through this hoop, it's
Yeah.
sickening to me. And I think even if I'd like to jump through that hoop, from a rational point of view, I say I can't help but feel repulsed by the
No, no, that's
idea.
understandable because I'm saying that we're in this slave economy where it's made into hoops. Everything worthwhile is made into a hoop to jump through, and it doesn't really have to be that way. And
Sure.
it doesn't. I mean, we don't have the right tools. If we had the right tools, you could do your math and science videos as education videos, and people could consume them as such.
Exactly. If I was
But in the
valued for
society
myself,
we're at, you'd have to be a salesman and a marketer too.
yeah.
That's
So,
not useful
so
because no, you're a mathematician. Why
I'm not
would you
being
be a great
valued for
salesman?
who I am, is the point. Yeah. When you construct a hoop, you're valuing the utility in some way of him rather than the use. To me, if there's a person who exists, right, this whole Asperger's thing and everything, this to me, it's like there's a subculture of mentalities and you can label, and sometimes these people they can find arenas which they can be happy. but there's a like my late uncle. He was really stubborn, right? And he would be the first to say how stubborn was. But he was happy doing his plumbing. Yeah, he was a plumber. Do you know what that means? Yeah, is it the same?
Yeah, I think so. Plumber, yeah, pipes.
Work, yeah, pipes and stuff. And he was happy doing that craft of plumbing, and he had a pride in that. But he had a real now to me, this stubbornness is like what I see in myself as a black and white dichotomy sometimes, in which I'm either, you know, happy or not happy, going to play this game or not play this game. And when I see it in this clear dichotomy, is when I'm saying, you know, I can switch off, you know, and that's that dichotomous viewpoint is what I relate to in Mendham.
See, the thing is, the way I would see it is like, and you know, there's a Ben Franklin angle to this of where the leather apron class, the plumbers and the printers and the, you know, I don't know, blacksmiths, whatever. If your uncle had at least half a purpose in that I'll be a good plumber, that's really actually beautiful, because how many people had hot water in their house, or how many people had a flood in their house that was solved, or how many, you know, he was solving real people's annoyances. He was fixing people that were fucked up. Basically, their life was fucked up because their plumbing was fucked up, and he fixed that, and he did a good job at it. That should count as a non-masturbatory purpose, because it's kind of like the coincidences we were talking about in science, in that, okay, you create this self-purpose, like that guy making mathematical videos, and he goes, is this just masturbatory? Well, evidently not, because when someone masturbates, nobody else gets any pleasure out of it. Well, sometimes I guess they could. And but so maybe even masturbation deserves this. But what I'm saying is, you happen to have enjoyed his videos. So his idea that this would be a purpose, and then it's masturbation, but you by coincidence, through a separate route in a way, enjoy it and get a purpose from it. It's like, well, two people got purposes by different routes. What an amazing coincidence. Why reject that? In fact, the fact that he got a purpose by being a good plumber, and I got my plumbing fixed, I mean, that's what life is made of. That's actually a high value that we are not doing justice. We are pretending that being a craftsman isn't really amount to much, and actually it is all that.
Well, you know, why should he have, because he's a plumber, why should he have you know, a nice house and nice TV and all the luxuries of life from a middle class point to a middle class level, when somebody else has been unlucky because he was poor in education? Somebody else was unlucky and only manages to pick up trolleys in the supermarkets there. And they can't even get out of the house with the parents because they can't afford a house, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I'm a socialist. I mean, I think all those people should have a living wage. I mean,
right. But from the point of view of myself trying to choose a purpose, you know, it's like, you know, I don't know. It all just seems grossly unfair, and I don't want to play. You know.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's it from my mentality, my black and white point of view.
Well, you know, I'm going to keep telling you these things about, you know,
my black and white point of view sometimes is like, it's unfair. No, forget it. I don't want to play. I might be able to. It might be worthy that I contribute maths. It might be worthy that I can fix machinery. It might be, but from your point of view, but it's just a whole fucking unfair game that I just don't want to play. Maybe I can be a lawyer. Maybe I want to
Right.
be a lawyer.
Well,
Maybe
part of
that's
me
a
wants
worthy
to.
maybe that's a worthy cause. But maybe it's all just a fucked up
Yeah.
game.
Well,
That's,
part of me doesn't want to annoy you, Hythloday, Justin,
yeah.
but part of me is like, I know I will keep annoying you in the sense that I think we're at a threshold where you should be, where the world is pretty much, it's pre-ready, right? It's ready, but it's a little bit pre-ready to, benefit from the contribution you want to make. And so that's probably is annoying, but partly it's because, I mean, from my point of view, you're struggling against accepting the value of that kind of work. Um, and see, from my point of view, you don't have to change anything. I mean, if you stay in your same situation, you figure out how to sustain yourself, in a way that's acceptable, or whatever the situation is in the UK of being able to live this way, and you make videos. I think through those videos, you can help the world. And so, and if you don't become an Einstein of that, I think it'll still end up helping the world that you try at it. Some kid that figures out the formula, it'll be because he was a big fan of you with your graph paper cutting board Lego demonstrations. He was like, wow, that really inspired me, and maybe he'll make the huge difference that you wouldn't call masturbation. And in reality, none of it was masturbation. It's all a contribution. So I have this sort of terminal optimism that I know can be annoying in the face of this cynicism and pessimism that we also share, right? So, I
Yeah.
acknowledge that, but I'm not going to back off. I do believe
No,
that
that's
we're at a
fine.
point, and also because I do believe that it's not just I'm saying this to another human being. I mean, this is something I could say to any human being, I guess. But in reality, it's also because, when you get all graph paper and whiteboard in your videos, I mean, I think you make a contribution that's somewhat rare and a little bit better than average. So, you as an individual have something special. But if some guy had nothing but mediocre math questions to offer, I would say the same thing to them, because you know what, that is a benefit too. And if you go into it trying to be a superstar and end up being somebody that's just asking regular questions, well, guess what? More people are going to connect with your regular questions than would have connected with your esoteric, high-minded. So it's like it all washes out. It's all a benefit. The fact that time keeps progressing and we take part becomes a
That's,
benefit.
that's a good point, right? I mean, I appreciate. I mean, it's part of why I like interacting with you personally on this level. But I, I used to know it'll come to me, but it was about mediocrity, and a quote that I often used to like to cite, and it's about the acceptance of mediocrity, and sometimes a person's internal level, like I see things the way you've just described them about, but the problem is sometimes internally the expectations is that I can't live with mediocrity of myself, you know, and
Yeah.
although you can argue for, look, we're all just living and contributing, and even if it's in some mediocre kind of way, you're still
Yeah.
contributing to humanity. Sometimes an individual
Yeah.
can reach a height internally that they look upon themselves and say, mediocrity is not good enough for me.
Right,
You
but the
know?
problem is that everybody with high standards faces that. So basically, everybody that's ever achieved anything of
Yeah,
a high
yeah, yeah.
standard,
Yeah, but
it's like they go,
that's
oh,
no advice, though.
yeah.
The fact that it's a common problem is no advice.
No, but
Um,
it is interesting because basically people that want to achieve things have to apply high standards to themselves. When they do that, they can achieve things and feel like they haven't. But if they hadn't applied the high standards, they wouldn't have achieved them. So it's, again, it's kind of a catch-22, But I feel the burden is on us
Exactly.
to enjoy that process. That's what Camus was saying with Sisyphus. It's like, okay, at that point, the project is.
Enjoy the mental torture of being on the losing end. Yeah, it's
But no,
all about
wait, no, no, no,
process. It's
no. But
all
the
about
Sisyphus.
process in which 1 or
Yeah.
5% of people reach these sublime heights.
No, but it's
and
not.
they
No,
make
no, it's not like that.
breakthroughs.
No, no, no. It's more like what
This is the
Sisyphus.
way I see it, though. The way
Yeah,
I
but
see
no,
it
it's more
is,
like Sisyphus. It's like he's saying Sisyphus has to roll the rock to the top of the hill and then watch it roll down. He says the project is enjoy that process. If you can figure out how to enjoy watching the rock roll down the hill, you might find yourself enjoying pushing it up the hill, so you get to watch it. And the thing is, the absurdity of life is that it doesn't matter if that's what you were hoping for. That's the problem. You either can or cannot enjoy that, and if you can, everything's fine. And guess what? You can enjoy that. You can enjoy rolling the rock down the hill. It's very fun to watch it roll down the hill, and you can enjoy pushing it up the hill to see it roll down the hill. And thus,
how
if you
many
can't do
times?
that, then you got a problem.
Yeah,
And that's why we have problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Exactly.
we're rolling rocks uphill.
This sounds like a good argument. Exactly. You know, like me and you were here at the Hill with the Rock, and and such forth. And it sounds like a good motivational leadership speech, but like before we start. But after like the 10,000 and billion,
right, the repetitiveness of it,
time, and I say, Pyro, I stopped.
Well, that's where it turns back into slavery. Like we wouldn't enjoy it because we had another choice. If you could roll a rock to the top of the hill, roll it down till you got bored, and then go do something else, then I could make my argument. But the fact that Sisyphus has to do that forever makes it like, well, of course he's going to get bored of watching it roll down and tormented by rolling it up.
Yeah,
but then again, that creates another question. Why does Sisyphus didn't lose his free will? Why does he keep rolling it up the hill? Why doesn't he just sit at the bottom of the hill with the rock and do other shit? Why does he feel compelled to push it to the top of the hill? But anyway, the Greeks are great with their the Hades is great. The tortures of Prometheus and everything, they're all very deeply meaningful. I'm a big fan of Greek mythology. I think it's better than Shakespeare as far as all of your lessons of life.
I love Greek mythology. I do.
Yeah. So there's very deep meanings in it.
Anyway. Well, it's about my bedtime, so it's been good talking to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you too.
I realised I don't really like group get-togethers unless they've got a really specific thing I want to say and.
Yeah,
stuff.
I get you. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
What's the name? Somebody I mentioned her earlier. I said that about the pornography and what was the name? I forgot.
I don't remember.
But she's in back. I have a. Anyway, I've said what I've said. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah, just a side point. Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing is, I like making my having a weekly hangout, but using that instead of making videos isn't really working. I've got to make videos during the week, sort of have subjects even. Yeah, it's sort of something where you process other information. It's not that great. And also when I would go to Gary's room, often I'd get in there and they're talking about movies and it would take me like 3 hours to get the conversation to something I was interested in. So I totally get, the group thing has positives, but it also really dilutes what you could talk about. So actually I really enjoy our conversation here where you talked about all sorts of things and then freestyled, but you came in with, hey, here's some questions, let's talk about this. It's like professionally, I don't have meetings unless there's an agenda.
That's right, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's part of the Asperger's, the thing is, if you want to believe in that sort of thing, You
Yeah.
know,
I
well,
tried to get diagnosed as Asperger's, but evidently no. But still, I definitely have
well,
some
the thing is
sympathy.
you can it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. I mean, there's like three or
We should do a
four.
talk on neurotypical at some point. Not
Yeah,
tonight, but
I mean, everybody's got the dial particularly high on one or two things, but when it
yeah.
starts interfering, with like myself, depression, failure of relationships, failure in work to get along with people, and this, that, and the other. Ultimately, there's a class of people out there you can say, they're having problems with this game, the way it's set up, I think, and whether that wants motivates the Asperger's diagnosis or not, I think that's something or another. Oh, look, that's nice.
He's my sweet dog.
Mm.
All right. Well, okay. Pet your dog a little bit, and we'll talk later. It's nice talking to you.
Yeah, see you later. Cheers,
Right
bye.
across the
Bye.
world, man. A quarter of the way. Okay. Bye. Cheers. everybody. I didn't leave. You thought I left? No. This is my upstairs computer. You thought I was gone? Oh, that's so cute of you. Okay, bye. I'm gone now.